The U.S. Revolution, a turning point in history. The personal story of Micjah Frasher by his seventh granddaughter, Mary Louise Lowe. Many men and women have sacrificed a great deal for the freedom we have here in the United States of America. Even the early colonists traveled many weeks on ships to establish a new life. Many of these people were here for the religious freedom. For over 100 years, the colonists who lived under English rule were taxed and did not have representation. The colonists rose up and fought for their right to be an independent country. I was so excited to learn my seventh great-grandfather, Micjah Frasher, was a revolutionary soldier. How do I really know this is true? If it is what was his life like. Was he like a typical soldier? While researching through Ancestry.com, Fold 3, the National Daughters of American Revolution, and National Archives, I learned some interesting details about my seventh great-grandfather, Micjah Frasher. I learned he served in the 1st Virginia Militia in 1780 for 18 months during the Revolution. In the war, he caught yellow fever, built breastworks, and was under the command of the French General Marquis de Lafayette. When Cornwallis surrendered to George Washington at Yorktown, he marched prisoners to the Virginia prison camps in Winchester. He was illiterate and did not apply for his pension until he was 82 years of age. I met with Dr. Andrew Howells, an associate professor of history at La Sierra University in Riverside, California, to find out more.
First of all, I think it's hard to know what a typical revolutionary soldier was because they came from different colonies. They were very different ages in some cases. Some had been born in the colonies and considered themselves colonial. Others had arrived on ships shortly before the conflict began. Some were veterans who had fought in what we call the French Indian War, which was part of the 7-Year War, whereas others had no experience whatsoever. So there's a very wide diversity of what a revolutionary soldier was. But we can certainly look at some of the features that your great-grandfather, Micjah Frasher, had and sort of see how that equates to what other soldiers were experiencing during this time period.
Can you tell us about yellow fever?
Having yellow fever was a common illness, particularly in the southern campaign, the southern colonies, Virginia, the Carolinas. It was one of the ones you didn't want to get, and was very, very deadly. And of course was a little bit more pronounced during the summer months. Further north, you wouldn't get yellow fever nearly as much, but you would get influenza, smallpox. There were just about as many casualties from disease as there were from the actual warfare itself. In fact, dying, being a fatality in the war from direct fire was very, very low down on the list of reasons for fatality. Much higher would be disease and infection.
Convalescing at home.
You were very, very lucky if you got something like yellow fever and survived, and usually it was because your family came and took care of you. Somebody who had a stake in your well-being. There were hospitals that you could go to, but they just weren't very well staffed. They often were breeding grounds for more disease and weren't necessarily the best route to go.
What were breastworks?
You could create these structures that would be basically high enough that somebody could hide behind them, but short enough that you could then stand up and return fire if you wanted to. And these were called bulwarks. They tended to be kind of in a V shape, faced out towards the enemy. They would come at defensive strong positions. There would often be gaps between the next one, and the goal was to put men with guns along these walls, and sometimes with things they could rest their guns on, and then they could return fire. So if his job was with breastworks, it probably means that he was either in charge or on the crew that would build them, or that his role in the fighting would be to man those breastworks once the fighting started, or it could have been both. But it sounds like he was involved in either creating these or defending them.
What was it like at the surrender of Yorktown?
Grandfather being present at the surrender of Cornwallis is a pretty incredible moment, I would suspect. One that I'm sure he remembers for the rest of his life. This was a very long war. It, until fairly recently, was one of the longest wars in American history. And to be present at the end of it, during the surrender, where you are standing near Lafayette and watching Cornwallis and George Washington, who would, in a few, in a short period of time, become the first president of this new country, must have been just a tremendous experience that you should be proud that one of your ancestors, your relatives, took part in.
What about the prisoners after the war?
It appears that your grandfather was one of the guards of this, but I don't think the British troops would have been going anywhere. They were on a foreign continent. Their best way of getting home would be to keep marching along, spend whatever time in prison camp they could, and get released and mustered back home. That's exactly what happened.
Why did soldiers have problems collecting their pension?
Pension should be paid out by the state. Should the federal government become involved? Remember, these were not citizens of the United States when they did their service. Well, they were, some of them, everyone after July of 1776. But who would pay? Would it be Virginia, or would it be the federal government? That argument was made time and time again. And in fact, if you look at particularly the pensions for the American Revolution, there's all these different acts, I think culminating in a couple of them in 1831 and then in 1832, that eventually kind of asserted the federal mandate that all veterans should be paid.
Was it common for soldiers to be illiterate?
It was not at all uncommon for soldiers to be illiterate. Many of them were. In fact, I printed out some examples. And these have been typed up, so but it's interesting. It's Philip, his X mark, acre. And what would happen is somebody would write for them, Philip acre, leaving enough space that they would be able to make their mark in between the two names.
Thank you, Professor Howe, for that information. The American Revolution turned the world upside down. The shot heard around the world was a pivotal point in time, not only American history, but world history as well. A group of mostly untrained soldiers from a diverse background, some born in America, many fresh off the boat, grouped together and fought a difficult, long war. These soldiers' sacrifice still ripples through the fabric of our nation, and my 7th great-grandfather, Micjah Frasher, was a part of it.